The GPS tracker I put on my wife's car 3 weeks ago showed she'd been parked at the same address on Birchwood Court every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for over a month. Not her sister's house. Not the yoga studio. A rental condo registered to a man named Todd Ingram, 31 years old, personal trainer at the gym where my wife had her membership. I'm a 54-year-old civil engineer. I build bridges for a living. I know what structural failure looks like. I know the exact moment a load-bearing element gives way. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I've been married for 22 years, that my daughter is 19 and home from her first year of college, and that I found out my wife has been lying to me since February. It started with a feeling, not a dramatic feeling, just a quiet wrongness, like a hairline crack you notice in a foundation wall. Nothing you can point to, nothing you can prove. She'd started going to the gym more, which I encouraged. She started coming home later, which she explained with new clients. She runs a small interior design business from home. She started sleeping on her side, facing away, which I told myself was just a phase. Then her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, and she grabbed it so fast, she knocked her water glass off the nightstand. She said it was a client in Portland with a deadline. I said okay. The next morning, when she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. I know that's not something to be proud of, but I did it anyway. His name was saved as T. Fitness. I put the phone down and went to make coffee, and I stood at the kitchen counter while the pot brewed, and I thought, this is what the rest of my life looks like now. Everything that comes after will be divided into before this moment and after it. I didn't confront her. I went to work. I sat at my desk and stared at load calculations for a pedestrian overpass outside Raleigh, and I thought about what a man does when 22 years turns out to have a false bottom. What he does, if he's smart, is wait, gather, document. A friend of mine, Hector, who I've known since our army days, works in private security now. I called him that afternoon from my car in the parking garage. I told him what I'd found. GPS tracker, he said before I'd even finished. And pull her cell records if you're on a family plan. You are, right? We were. Don't touch her phone again. Don't change your behavior. Don't tip her off. You're building a case, not having a fight. I followed his advice exactly. I also installed a camera in the entryway of our house, the kind that blends into a smoke detector. My house, my equipment, completely legal. 2 weeks later, I had everything I needed. My daughter had come home for the summer by then. She was sitting at the kitchen island eating cereal when I got home from work on a Thursday, and she said, "Dad, where's Mom?" "Yoga," I said. She nodded and went back to her phone. She didn't know yet that her mother's car was parked 3 miles away on Birchwood Court. My daughter's name is Nell. She has her mother's eyes and my stubbornness. She was studying pre-law, and she had a way of reading situations that made me feel both proud and exhausted. I knew that when I finally told her, she would ask hard questions in the right order, and she would not stop until she had answers. I went down to my study and sat in the dark for a while. Here's the thing about being a structural engineer. Everything you build exists because you plan for every possible failure, every load, every stress point, every kind of weather. You don't just design for the good days. You design for the day everything goes wrong at once. I had been planning for 2 weeks. I was ready. I called my brother-in-law first. This is important context. My wife's younger brother, Marco, has been one of my closest friends for 15 years. He stood in my wedding. He calls me when he has problems before he calls her. He is funny and loyal, and he has zero tolerance for dishonesty. It's practically a reflex with him. I called him from the parking lot of a Walgreens and I told him everything. The GPS data, the phone records, the name. There was a long silence. "How long?" he said. "Records go back to February. Could be longer." Another silence. Then, "I'm going to be sick. I know. She's my sister. I know that too. What do you need from me?" I told him. I needed him to come over for dinner on Saturday, 2 days away. I needed him to act normal. I needed him to not say a word to their parents. Not yet. And after Saturday, he said. After Saturday, everything changes. He said he'd be there. I spent the next day making 2 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, a woman named Patricia Ellsworth, who I'd met through a colleague during a contract dispute 3 years ago. I gave her the summary. She told me that in our state, marital fault was relevant to asset division under certain conditions, and that documented evidence of adultery, timestamped GPS data, cell records, camera footage, was absolutely admissible. "How much do you have?" she asked. "Enough to fill a filing cabinet," I said. "Good. Don't share any of it with her. Don't threaten. Don't negotiate. Let her think everything is fine until we file. For how long? How long can you hold it together?" I looked out my office window at the city skyline, 22 years of holding things together. "As long as I need to," I said. The second call was to my daughter's college roommate, Jess, who was the only person I trusted to prepare Nell without lying to her. I told Jess that things at home were about to get hard and that Nell was going to need a friend on call. Jess didn't ask too many questions. She just said she'd be available. Saturday dinner was my wife's idea, actually. She'd invited Marco over herself, which in hindsight says a lot about how comfortable she'd gotten with her own deception. Comfortable enough to host family dinners. She made her lamb chops. I opened a good Cabernet. The table was set the way she likes it, with the linen napkins her mother gave us and the good plates. Marco arrived at 6:30 with a bottle of wine, and the most convincing casual expression I've ever seen on a man who was barely holding it together. He hugged his sister. He sat across from me and we talked about his job and Nell's classes and a home renovation he was thinking about. Normal, easy. Nell was home, but she'd already made plans with a friend and left after saying hello. Timing. That was the one part of the evening I'd left to chance, and it worked out. After dinner, while my wife was in the kitchen making coffee, Marco looked at me across the table. Just a look. I gave him a small nod. When she came back and set the cups down and sat with that smile she's always had, that smile I fell in love with. I laid my phone on the table between us. I need to show you something, I said. She looked at the phone, then at me, then at Marco. I pulled the GPS data from the tracker I put on your car 3 weeks ago, I said. I also pulled 3 months of cell records. I have timestamps, addresses, call logs, and text summaries from the carrier. And I have footage from the entryway camera showing the two of you on March 14th when you brought him here. She had brought him to our house once. That was the part that had done something to me I still don't have words for. Our house, where Nell grew up, where we'd built everything. Dave, she started. My name isn't Dave. I'm telling you how it felt when she said it. That quick reach for my name like it was a rope. Don't, I said. Marco was very still across the table. She looked at her brother. Something passed over her face. The quick arithmetic of someone calculating who in the room knew what and who they could still manage. Marco, she said. This is between me and no, Marco said quietly. It's not, she looked back at me. How long have you known? Long enough, I can explain. You can't, I said it without anger. I'd spent 2 weeks burning through the anger until there was nothing left but this flat certainty. There's nothing to explain, I have the evidence. My attorney has copies of everything. On Monday, she's filing. Her face changed. You already have an attorney? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. She said, I felt invisible. Marco made a sound. Not quite a laugh. Something harder than that. You felt invisible, I repeated. For how long, I don't know. Years, I said. You felt invisible for years and your solution was a 31-year-old personal trainer named Todd, and you brought him into our house and you lied to my face every single day, and now you feel invisible. She started to cry, real tears. I've known this woman for 25 years. I know what her real tears look like. What do you want me to say? She asked. I don't want you to say anything. I want you to understand that the conversation is over. What happens next is between the attorneys. Marco pushed his chair back. He looked at his sister for a long time. Then he said, I love you, but I can't look at you right now. He stood up and walked to the front door and let himself out. She watched him go with the expression of someone watching a building collapse. She didn't leave that night. The house was hers too, technically, and I wasn't going to make a scene. I moved to the guest room. She knocked on the door at 11:30 and said we needed to talk, and I said, contact Patricia Ellsworth, and didn't open the door. The next morning, Nell came home. She walked into a house where both parents were silent and sitting in separate rooms, and she stood in the kitchen doorway and said, what happened? I brought her to the living room. Her mother wasn't in the room. I sat Nell down and I told her everything, not the legal strategy, not the details, but the essential truth, that I had discovered her mother had been having an affair, that I had documented it for 3 weeks, and that I had filed for divorce. She didn't cry immediately. She sat very still. Then she said, how long? Since at least February, maybe longer. Who is he? I told her. She said, the trainer, Mom's trainer? I nodded. She was quiet for a full minute. Then she said, did she bring him here? I said yes. She stood up and walked upstairs. I heard her knock on our bedroom door. Her mother's voice, tentative. Then Nell's voice, controlled and cold in a way I hadn't heard from her before, the way she gets when she's doing the pre-law thing, when she's laying out an argument. I couldn't hear what she said. I didn't try to. She came back down 20 minutes later. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. Going to stay, she said. I'm not going anywhere. This is still your house, and I'm staying with you. That hit me harder than almost anything else in those 3 weeks. On Monday, Patricia Ellsworth filed the paperwork. On Tuesday, I called Todd Ingram's gym. I didn't yell. I didn't make threats. I asked for the manager, and I told the manager, calmly, that an employee of theirs had been conducting a months-long affair with a married client, that the affair had taken place in part during sessions the client was billed for on company records, and that I was simply making them aware in case this raised any professional or liability concerns. I faxed them a copy of the GPSS records showing the hours Todd's car had been at our house. During hours, my wife was also being billed for training sessions. The manager called me back the next day to say Todd Ingram had been terminated effective immediately. I also sent one message, to the woman I'd identified from the cell records as the person Todd had been seeing before my wife. I sent it to her LinkedIn, which felt less invasive than tracking down her personal number. I told her I thought she deserved to know what I'd found. I sent her one attachment, a call log. She replied 4 hours later with 2 words, "Thank you." I don't know what she did with it. That was her business. 3 weeks after the filing, I was sitting on the back deck with a beer watching the sun go down when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Is this the guy who got Todd fired?" It was a man's voice. Late 20s, I guessed. "Who is this?" I said. "My name's not important. I just want you to know he's telling people you're harassing him. Saying you're obsessed. Saying your wife came to him. He can say whatever he wants." I said. "Just thought you should know. I appreciate it," I said, and I meant it. Then I added, "For what it's worth, he's not wrong that she came to him. That's true. But a man with any character says no." There was a pause. Then the guy on the other end said, "Yeah," in a way that meant more than one thing, and hung up. Nell came out through the sliding door holding 2 glasses of iced tea and sat down in the other chair. She was on her laptop, going over summer reading for a class. We didn't talk for a while. The yard was going golden in that early summer way, the hedge her mother had planted along the fence looking full and green. "Dad," she said finally. "Yeah, are you okay?" I thought about it. The honest version, not the reflexive version. "Not yet," I said. "But I will be." She nodded like that was the right answer, like she'd expected it and was satisfied by it. The divorce took 7 months. Patricia Ellsworth was precise and relentless, and made the other side wish they'd brought a bigger team. Because of the documented fault, the GPS records, the cell logs, the footage, the timestamps, all of it, the settlement was substantially in my favor. I kept the house. I kept the retirement accounts. My wife received a negotiated settlement and moved into an apartment on the west side of the city. Todd Ingram, from what Hector told me, had moved in with a cousin somewhere in Tennessee. His professional reputation in this city was finished. Nell graduated the following May. I sat in the bleachers in the heat with Hector on one side and Marco on the other, and I watched my daughter walk across the stage, and she found my face in the crowd and grinned. That same lopsided grin she's had since she was 7 years old, and I clapped until my palms hurt. Marco put his hand on my shoulder. "She's something else," he said. "Yeah," I said. "She is." That night we went to dinner, the 3 of us. Nell ordered the most expensive thing on the menu on principle, and then made us play a game where we each had to say one thing we were looking forward to. Hector said retirement. Marco said his renovation being done. I said sleep, which got a laugh, but what I meant was something larger than that. The particular kind of rest that comes when you've stopped bracing for impact. I still drive the same truck. I still build bridges. I still leave my boots by the back door and make terrible coffee and watch football on Sunday afternoons with the sound too loud. The house is quieter now. Some days I notice it and it feels like loss. Some days I notice it and it feels like room. Nell calls every Sunday. Without fail. That's enough. That's more than enough.